Hi, this is Don Loyd. Thanks for joining us today. You're visiting Simple Strategies for Personal Growth. And I have a question for you that I want to start out with. Have you ever felt like you're so busy doing things that you can't live your own life? Generally, you find yourself in this dilemma because you think you have to say yes to everybody who asks you for your time. Now, don't misunderstand me. I think helping people is a good thing and it's a needful thing. But it becomes a bad thing when all you do is say yes whenever someone calls. I'm here today with Shannon Bart, who is going to give you some insight on how to gain control of your life and your time so that you can live the life that you were intended to live. And by way of introduction, Shannon is a therapist and a health coach, and she's helped lots of people over the years in various forms of disciplines. And I think that Shannon is a wonderful person, and she has some great information. Thank you for being here, Shannon.
Good morning, Don. It's nice to be here.
Listen, I have a question for you. In general terms, can you tell us what the problem of saying yes is?
Real simply, Don, I think the problem with always saying yes is that we're often saying no to the things that are really important to us, and we don't even realize we're doing that. I know so many people and have spoken to so many people who can identify things on a daily basis that they've agreed to do, that they wish they didn't have to do, that they got into without thinking about it or without realizing that it was going to be a real burden for their time and their energy. And if they had given some thought to their answer, or if they'd been brave enough, they would have said no to it in the first place. When I say you're saying no to what's important to us, what I mean is every time you commit yourself to someone else for something else, you're possibly saying no to free time, sleep, taking care of your family, being with your friends, doing the things that really are important to you, because you're limiting the amount of time you have to do those things.
Well, Shannon, where do people, generally speaking, pick up this life pattern of feeling that they have to say yes to people?
When I talk to people about this particular issue and when they express being overstressed and overtaxed on their time, it's often about wanting to please other people, being afraid that if they say no, they'll offend somebody won't like them. And, a lot of that has to do with growing up, learning that it's more important to please other people and make sure other people are happy with you than really listening to what's true for yourself. And so some of that has to do with self-esteem. I don't want to make anybody mad. I want everybody to like me. And we just learn that over time. We grow up learning that it's more important to please other people than to make sure we're taken care of.
Well, I think it's important that we get involved in other people's lives. I think it's important that we seek to be a help to other people. But if I understand you correctly, you're saying it's okay to do that. It's okay to be involved in someone else's life. But it's also okay to say no, because it can get to a point where it's unhealthy for me to always say yes and not have time to fulfill what God has intended for me. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And what I'm saying really is when you say yes to everything, you're trading quality of your time for quantity of time. And the more overextended you get, you may be participating in the things people want you to be, but you're not 100% there, really. You may be unhappy about it, so you're irritable. You're thinking about other things and where you'd rather be than being there. So the quality of your time and your attention and your energy goes down because you're overextended. So what I want people to do is trade back quality for quantity. Get back your quality instead of always giving so much time, so much quantity.
Okay, well that raises a question for me, Shannon. What are some areas of interest that are easy to say yes to? And what I'm thinking about specifically, it's easy to say yes when a nonprofit organization wants you to serve on a board, or if your church wants you to be involved in their ministry in somehow. What are some other areas that are very, very easy to say yes to that perhaps we should reevaluate and say that maybe that's not the best for me?
It's interesting to me, Don, that you bring up some things, a couple areas that you and I have talked about, and that is the church and nonprofits, because what those become for people are shoulds. I should do this. It looks good for me to do this. If I volunteer for the board, then I'm fulfilling my obligation to society, or it looks good for me to do that. And the same thing that goes with church groups. You know, social obligations are another thing. I've worked with several people who, one in particular, who every day of this person's life was committed to somebody else for something. And frequently our discussions were about, I just don't know how to say no, I don't want to disappoint anybody, but this person being constantly exhausted, constantly overextended, and never feeling like this person had personal time to really do what would fulfill her own soul. So social obligations are another area. When you know a lot of people and your social sphere is large, it's really important but also really difficult for people to choose those engagements that are most important to them and be able to say no to the everyday, will you do blank with me?
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Let me tell you what I do, and I haven't shared this with you before, and you just tell me what you think about this approach to it. For me personally, when I'm given an opportunity for time involvement, whether it be for a good cause or a bad cause or whatever, I come back to a place where I identify my purpose in life. I've articulated why I exist. So I have a purpose statement for my life. I have a purpose statement for my companies. I have a purpose statement for my life. And when I'm invited to get involved in an activity, I ask the question, I pause a moment, and I ask the question, does this activity help me fulfill my purpose? You know, we can get involved, my personal opinion is we can get involved in doing so many good things that we don't have time for the best things. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And so if I respond by saying, does this activity help me fulfill my purpose? And if I can honestly say no, then I can, without fear of guilt, I can say no to that person because that activity doesn't help me be who God wants me to be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that approach?
You know, I think, honestly, my first thought is we should have one of these conversations about purpose and about working with people to identify their own values, because I think those are pieces that are really helpful when people are trying to say no to things and pick and choose opportunities that are really important for them. I think if people can step back and take a moment before they answer or respond to requests for their time and think about, like you said, do I really want to do this? Is this really going to be, does this contribute positive to my life, or do I feel like it's taking from me if I participate in this? And answer based on that, answer the person based on their own answer to that question. I think they'll be better able to say no to the things that aren't important to them and yes to the things that are. Again, this is not about saying no to everything. This is about picking and choosing what's really important so that you can contribute all your energy to those things. What I like to have people do is ask themselves when these opportunities come up, and they say opportunity because each time this comes up in your life, it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to be true to yourself. It's an opportunity to pick and choose what's important to you and how you want to contribute and how you want it to contribute to you as well. So when these opportunities come up, if you can ask yourself, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? So if I say yes to being on the board of a nonprofit, what am I saying no to? Am I saying no to my personal business that I want to develop that that it will take time away from? Am I saying no to my children, who I already feel like I don't spend enough time with?
Or your husband?
Or your husband, absolutely. If I do that, is it taking more time from my spouse? And that's a really important relationship. Am I saying no to myself and the amount of sleep that I get? Am I saying no to feeling stress-free and balanced? All of those things that we don't realize we're saying no to them when we say yes to all of those things. So if I can get somebody to say to themselves, what am I saying no to if I say yes to this? Often they're very surprised at how that helps switch their focus and helps them make a better decision.
Absolutely. The title of this session is The Power in No, and I truly believe there is power in saying no, because you're not getting so bogged down in all the good things where you exclude the better things. Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you another question. I believe that there are a lot of people who just don't know how to say no to people. They just want to say yes for a variety of reasons, and you've already touched on many of those. I think an important question that we have to answer, and hopefully you will give us the answer to this. You're the answer lady. What can the folk do to break the tendency to always say yes? We've already alluded to it a little bit in that we want to review the activity to see if it goes along with our life purpose or our mission statement or whatever you want to call it. How do the folk break the tendency to say yes?
Well, again, my challenge to people is to ask yourself what it is you're saying no to, and really spend some time thinking about that. What I want, I just said the challenge is, but what I want to challenge people to do is to say no one time. We have these fears. If I say no, we have these irrational fears about all the things that are going to happen if we say no to somebody. If I tell my friends no, that I won't go do blank with them, they're going to be angry at me, they're going to be disappointed in me, they're not going to like me anymore. Usually those are the types of things that come up for us when we're afraid to say no. So say no one time and find out that those things are not normally true. Those things don't usually happen. You don't have to say, no, you're not worth my time. Of course, we wouldn't say that to somebody. You would say, I don't have time. I don't have time to do that today. Maybe we could get together another time. There are all kinds of ways to talk to people who are requesting our time about how it doesn't work, and arrange for something else that does work for you. And so what I want people to do is say no one time and check out those maybe untrue assumptions that we have about what's going to happen if we say no. And the other beautiful thing about saying no one time is it feels good. When you honor yourself and say, that doesn't work for me because something else is more important, it fills your cup. It fills your soul. It fills your energy level. And you start to realize that the things you do participate in are more fun. You have more energy for them. You're not resentful because you're doing things that you don't really want to be doing. So you're freely engaging in things for other people and for yourself rather than doing so begrudgingly. Very
good. I think maybe those that are listening to us are primarily adults. I could be wrong on that. Hopefully I'm wrong on that. But as we've gone through this discussion, I've seen another aspect of saying no, and that's with teenagers. Mm-hmm. And let me give you a personal lesson or a personal experience. When I was a teenager, I didn't want to get involved with drugs or drinking, and I would purposely ask my friends when they invited me out. I would say, "You guys going to be drinking tonight?" And if they said yes, I would say no. I'm not going. That was a choice that I made, and because I couldn't see any upside. I would see my friends go out and get drunk or do dope or whatever, and they could be sick the next morning maybe, mm-hmm. throwing up and talking about what a wonderful time they had, and it just didn't make sense to me. And I just chose not to do that, and there were some other things I was involved in that as well, that other things I was involved in or invited to be involved in that I said no. And that's from from a guy's perspective, but from a girl's perspective, especially a teenage girl's perspective, as it relates to boys, I think there's a tremendous power in being able to say no to a boy.
Absolutely.
Do you want to enlighten us on that, or do you want to expand that a little bit?
It's interesting that you say that, because I've actually recently had conversations with quite a few females about that very issue, about being young and being in situations with boys where they felt like they couldn't say no, or they were afraid to say no because they didn't want the person to be upset at them, or they didn't want them not to like them, or they just didn't know how to. Sometimes they felt like they'd gotten themselves into an uncomfortable situation and it was their fault. So what I would want teenage girls to hear is, even if you find yourself in that situation and you think that for whatever reason you got yourself there, it's still your choice to say no. You have that prerogative, and please do. And again, that's about people won't like me if I say no. It takes a very strong person in those situations, and in the situations that you brought up, to say no, to be able to say, that doesn't work for me, it's not in alignment with my morals or my ethics or my beliefs or my whatever, who I am. And it takes a really strong person to do that. And I think it's very important as adults for us to be examples for our children of the ability to say no to our friends, to make choices that are good and healthy and in alignment with good values, so that our kids can see that. They learn what they live. They learn what they see. They learn from example. So it's another really great benefit to being able to set boundaries in your life as an adult, particularly when you have children. You're teaching them that as well.
Very good. All right, I have a question for you. How will our lives change if we learn to say no?
Well, I want to go back to my statement about quality versus quantity. We have a tendency to fill our lives with miscellaneous engagements and time constraints. And they may not feel like miscellaneous things at the time, but if you're saying yes to things you don't really want to do, they're miscellaneous. And the quality of what you're doing goes down every time you do that. Our lives will have more purpose. I think they'll be more purpose-driven. They will be more fulfilling. And it contributes to the concept that we talk about personal control. This is really, again, about having personal control and taking responsibility for your choices and making choices that are good for you. And again, this makes me think at some point we really need to talk about helping people identify personal values so that they can use those as a guideline for making their choices and taking personal control. But I've never seen anybody's life make any kind of a change but positive when they adapt or incorporate the ability to say no to things that aren't as important to them as other things. Like you say, trading in the good things for the really great things. That's a great statement. So, and I think people tend to respect us more when we do that. They realize that when we choose to be with them, it's because we really want to be. And we enjoy their company, and they enjoy ours. And so the concept, again, of quality versus quantity, I think is really important in that. So the quality of your life goes up, and whereas maybe the quantity of your responsibilities goes down.
Well, where can people go to get some help or some assistance in learning how to say no?
In most communities, we've talked about this before, there are agencies and places that you can go. You can usually get on the internet or go to the Yellow Pages. I'd be happy to help either talk to people about that or direct them to the right places.
Can you give us your email address, please?
Absolutely. My email address is beingwellcoach@yahoo.com, and that's beingwellcoach@yahoo.com. Drop me an email, and I'll get back to you, and we'll figure something out and set you in the right direction.
Hey, I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It's been great.
You're a smart lady.
Well, you're a smart man.
Thank you for being with us, and stay tuned for the next session.
Thanks, Don.